Hello and welcome back. It's time to take a look at the space submarine, the Corax 2 Assault. This ship is actually quite similar to the Talwar 2 Assault, at least both of them use the same weapon system. However, the ship skill per level bonuses will be quite different, except with the roll bonus and a stasis warfare bonus that will be basically the same for the Talwar and for the Corax 2 Assault. So you get 25% missile torpedo flight velocity, plus 5 second damage control activation time, plus 12.5 second small missile torpedo damage, plus 10% small missile torpedo explosion velocity from the advanced small missile torpedo operation bonus skill, and the advanced destroyer command bonus will give you plus 75% SystemsEVE optimal range, plus 7.5% Nosferatu optimal range, and minus 2% inertia modifier. Overall, quite interesting. And I'll definitely be playing around with the Nosferatu on this little boat. 5 high slots, 3 medium slots, 4 low slots, 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs. The cargo hold is quite impressive for a small ship. The defense is a little bit lower than on the Talwar, 9.3 thousand. The Talwar has 10.5 thousand. This ship is primarily a shield tank. The capacitor is okay for a destroyer. The recharge time and recharge rate is about the same as on the Talwar. It can lock 8 targets. A signature radius that is a little bit higher, a little bit larger than the Talwar, and the ship should be a little bit slower than the Talwar. After all, the Talwar is a military ship and they are known for their speed. So I have 518.82 DPS with the small missile launchers. 5.1 km per second is the flight velocity, 9.98 second is the activation time, 255 meter per second is the explosion velocity, 23.68 meter is the explosion radius, 24.75 km is the maximum range. I have one Predator Disruptor, Predator Web, one medium energy Nosferatu. 15.81 km is the optimal range, which is actually really nice. 8.94 km is the accuracy fall-off. This ship will also have power grid issues, like the Talwar. The destroyers will really have low power grid, and it's difficult to oversize the modules on these small ships. Dual boosters, 1 damage control and 1 afterburn. As for the rigs, I have the same combat rigs as on the Talwar, basically dual loading bay accelerators and 1 warhead rigor catalyst. I kinda like this setup. Does seem to be quite cost effective and it works really well. As for the engineering rigs, I have 2 very cheap 2P integrations. I have combined the capacitor rig with the power grid rig. Basically, I want the maximum possible capacitor performance as well as a larger power grid so that I can fit the larger modules a little bit easier. 17,000 is the overall hit point. Now the capacitor is actually super stable with this current build. This is thanks to the medium Nosferatu. As for the rigs, as for the implants, you can use the warhead charge or you can use the tactical missiles. I personally prefer the warhead charge because you can change the damage type, and overall the warhead charge is extremely fun to use, does improve the DPS quite a bit, and overall I had a blast. I literally had a blast using this implant, so I really do like it. And the general unit setup can be the same as on the Talwar. After all, both are shield tanks, so the general unit setup is going to be the same as on the Talwar 2 Assault. The capacitor is now a little bit less stable because I did change the output boost for the small shield boosters. However, if you run the medium booster, then I would use the energy saving unit. Level 15 is enough. Level 30 if you really like the ship. Level 45 is, I would say, pointless. I don't have any level 45 implants. I only have the barrage on level 33, and I feel like the 3 levels above 30 were kind of a scam. So if you really like the ship, go maximum up to level 30, but don't go above that. That's Based on my experience, I will never get that ISK back from the three level ups from 30 that I did with the barrage implant. Well then, let's take a look at the active stats of this little boat. Now I have 50,000 hit points when the damage control is active, which can be really good for quick engagements. After all, you have very high alpha damage and you will yeet frigates, you will yeet interceptors, you will yeet other destroyers very easily. The speed is 726 meters per second, which honestly is not that impressive. The Talwar was a lot faster, but that's to be expected. With this little boat, you get extra damage application, and I think damage application is quite a valuable thing for missiles. Not all ships have excellent damage application with missiles, so having a ship that can apply the damage really well is very helpful. Some excellent explosion radius stats and some pretty good range with the other long range and with the precision mode on the implant. Now you can also change into the explosive or thermal missiles. The nanocore is the same nanocore that I had on the Talwar. 16.80% extra missile torpedo damage, which is nice. I don't think that's a very difficult to obtain nanocore. I think it's very easy to reverse engineer. I have seen a lot of destroyers use this nanocore, so I have decided to pick it up for this little test today. Now we can use the torpedoes or the rocket launchers, both are valid terms. I really love to use the rocket launchers on these destroyers. They are so ridiculously fun to use. The DPS is excellent. The satisfaction level that you get from using them is also amazing. And this is the build that I have. Now I have, surprisingly, extra powered. This is because I wasn't able to slap a medium Nosferatu and a medium shield booster. However, if I go and use lower grade modules, I would probably be able to use them, but currently don't have any available, so I'll just stick with the current build. This is a passive shield tank. You have a lot of shield now, 10,000 shield, and you have a damage control and one adaptive hardener, which should give you decent stats for about 18 seconds, or it should give you still decent resistances for a longer duration of time. With the adaptive, you can easily use dual adaptives. I think I will show you that build next. But for this build, you can easily swap the afterburner for a micro updrive, basically to close the distance to the target faster. The one thing that I might see problematic on this ship is its speed might not be fast enough to use the torpedoes for PvP, especially if you like to engage frigates. But if you use the micro updrive with the normal missiles, then I believe it should be working really well. But if you happen to land close to a frigate, I believe that this build will absolutely shred them. After all, the destroyers are actually a bit more tanky than the frigates, and they are basically made to yeet frigates. Now the stats on the rocket launchers are really good. I really like them. The explosion velocity, the explosion radius is ridiculously small. You will definitely apply most damage on this thing. I can see this ship being used as bait to bait frigates. They will definitely try to fight you up close, and if you scramble them and web them, and if you happen to have the DPS build with dual ballistic controls and the damage control, I believe the frigate will have a very, very bad day. Now for a kite build, I imagined something like this with the passive shield tank, damage control afterburn, micro updrive, damage control medium, shield extender, and one adaptive. The capacitor is stable. I did use one Nosferatu. I think it's a small one. The small Nosferatu, like I mentioned before, is very useful. Very useful when you orbit at 0. Very useful when you're fighting a Balgorn. Basically, in order to kill a Balgorn up close, all you need is a small capacitor battery and a small Nosferatu, and you should orbit at 0 with an afterburner. That way the Balgorn will never hit you, and eventually the Balgorn will kill its own capacitor. It's one very evil trick that small ships can use against big Blood Raider ships, Blood Raider cruisers, and basically works against any battleship. 1.3 km per second is the velocity. Can be improved with a general unit. The capacitor is super stable, which is always a very nice thing. The DPS and the application on the normal small missile launchers will be pretty good. Now the build that I really like is the DPS build on this ship. So I have dual ballistic controls, one medium booster or medium Nosferatu and a small booster. Okay, small macro updrive, small booster, and dual C-type ballistic controls. As you can see, my pirate is basically filled up to the top, so you can't really fit a missile guidance computer on the stars because it takes up the whole pirate. So unfortunately, that's I think that I wasn't able to do, but I think they don't really need one because their application and range is already pretty good. What was that? That was a very weird error. I have enough pirate, but the ship complains that I don't. It's a weird thing that happens when your pirate is basically filled up to the top. I think I have like 100% of power used, which is hilarious. 871.84 DPS with this build. The tank is of course not going to be the best, but you'll basically kill frigates in 1 or 2 hits. That's how silly this little monster can be. 1071.56 DPS with 1 ballistic control, and with the second one 1.2000. This is with explosive or thermal missiles at 24.76 kilometers. Activation time is 6 seconds, which is not bad. Okay, let's dock and let's see if I will change the build a couple more times.
Docking request accepted.
Now, last time I did roll the Talwar to assault with rocket launchers, and I had a blast with that thing. So now I will actually show you some of the drawbacks of this little boat. Now, every destroyer has its own thing, and every destroyer has basically its advantage and disadvantage. There will be some things where one will be good and some things that it will be bad at. The other destroyer can be the opposite. It can be good at the things that the other one was bad at, and you know, that's basically how it goes. Now, the signature radius reduction on the Talwar 2 assault makes it excellent for a micro warp drive speed tank, while this ship doesn't really have that. So if you are using the micro warp drive, you will see that ships that I'm currently fighting here are definitely doing some damage on my shield. Now I picked the DPS build, but you can easily use the dual small booster build, or you can easily do the medium booster build. I will do the medium booster build in this video in combat a little bit later, but first I just wanted to show you the difference between how much difference the micro object reduction can do. Now with the Talwar, you can easily run low sec storylines, you can run low sec encounters, high sec encounters using the normal small missiles. With the micro warp drive, the ships that you're fighting will not hit you. However, because this ship is a little bit slower and the signature radius penalty will be greatly, let's say, affected by the micro warp drive, the bloom will be big, so the enemy turrets will not have a big issue at hitting you. 294 meters is the current signature radius of this little ship, which equals the signature radius of, I believe, a battle cruiser, or perhaps I'm probably going to be wrong with this, but perhaps even a battleship. I think the Macariel has like 300 meter signature, perhaps even lower. I believe the Macariel has one of the lowest battleship signatures, but it's basically a very big signature, and turrets will hit you. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that they will hit you constantly all the time. You have to focus down the ships that do hit you, which means kill the small ships first, frigates, destroyers, cruisers, battlecruisers, and then at the end finish off the battleship. And this is what I'm trying to do here. Now the capacitor is extremely stable. If you're fighting a ship that has a much greater capacitor than your capacitor, and if they can't hit you, your capacitor will be basically stable throughout the whole fight. If they do damage to you, you can repair, you can boost the shield, and you can basically boost the shield permanently. As long as the enemy's capacitor is greater than your capacitor, the Nosferatu will do the job just fine. So both the small Nosferatu and the medium Nosferatu is going to work really well on this ship. Now the ideal build that I would share with you right now would be to use a medium Nosferatu and a medium booster. However, with the current power grid limitations, I am not able to fit the best Nosferatu and the best shield booster. However, if you decide to use lower meta level modules or lower grade modules, let's say Mark 7 Nosferatu and Mark 7 shield booster, and if you use a let's say a similar power grid rig setup on this ship, you could technically use those two modules with this current build, and you will not have much problems with tanking much damage. After all, the Nosferatu will definitely maintain the capacitor for the medium shield booster. The other modules don't use much energy. Basically, the medium booster will be the most power hungry module on your ship. So you could make it capacitor stable that way. However, for high sec missions, I really recommend that you go and use the rocket launchers with a afterburner and a small Nosferatu and a medium shield booster. This is basically the build that I used on the Talwar 2 Assault. I had again so much fun with that ship. There is something so satisfying when you see the rockets just launch constantly every second, and it's just very entertaining to watch. It's very pretty as well, so you feel the time fly by basically. The game is not about competing in ISK generation. I always say this, basically play the game at your own pace. You don't have to earn like I don't know, 15 billion per day. I'm honestly happy if I get 100 million ISK per day, although I think most of you know how much ISK I make with my battleships, cruisers, and with my dreadnought. So let's not talk about that too much. But I think you get what I'm trying to say. It's not really important how much ISK you make. It's important that you make ISK, and it's important that you have fun. How much ISK you make doesn't matter. Any number of ISK you made for the day is basically going to be pretty good. So don't compete with other players in that aspect, because the game is not really about competing who makes more ISK. That's a little bit dumb if you ask me. Now, this is where the signature radius is biting me in the rear here. My shield is getting a little bit low. The capacitor was low because I wasn't really in the optimal Nosferatu orbiting distance, but looks like my little boat will have to warp out because my armor got scratched, and yeah, time to go. So this is one of the moments where the big signature radius is going to affect the performance of this ship. So with that being said, well, time to go, swap the build, and let's use the rocket launchers, and let's use the afterburner on this ship. Now the thing is that this little boat applies more damage, and I noticed that it does a little bit more damage than a Talwar, which I guess trades with the speed and with the signature radius, but that's not really a big issue once you equip the afterburner. Now with the afterburner you get a good speed increase, but you don't get any signature radius penalty, so your signature will be small. You'll be moving quite fast for most ships, and you will be orbiting quite close. So I have the dual ballistic controls. I have one afterburner, and I have the small missile launcher. I mean, I have the not small missile launchers, but the small rocket launchers, the torpedoes. And well, now I'm fairly sure I'll take absolutely no damage from anything. I'll orbit at 0. Basically, I'm going to orbit at the same distance as with the Talwar. And you will notice that this little boat slaps a bit harder than a Talwar, which is you know, quite a interesting thing. Now, I noticed the tower has a bit more range. I believe that's because of the rigs. I just noticed that the rigs that I use are not really the same. I did give the ship a bit more, I guess, a bit more missile damage application. I reduced the explosion velocity a bit. Actually, did I do the same on the Talwar? I actually forgot. Never mind. Let's just say that they are using about the same build. I built so many ships lately, so it's sometimes a bit difficult to remember every single specific detail, but usually I'm pretty good at those things, so my apologies for failing with that today. But the builds should be about the same, because I figured out that might as well compare these two ships, and with comparing them I have to basically use the same build. However, as you can see, this little boat has no issues with the tank now, no issue with the capacitor. The medium booster can definitely help out with boosting the shield if necessary. And the same idea does work with this ship. Now, my implant is a little bit bugged, so I have to basically long click on the missile to see what type of missiles I'm using. Currently using explosive missiles. I use the thermal missiles for shield, explosive for armor and hull. If you don't like this combination, you can easily use EM missiles for shield and kinetic for hull and armor. That's also a combination that works really well. The missile combination that you like to use is basically up to your preference or up to the ship, because I know some ships have a bonus on specific missile damage types, so it might be useful in that case, but I personally like this combination. Explosive eats armor, while thermal can eat both armor, hull and shield, but I personally use it for shield because the shield has lower thermal resistance than explosive. The lowest stat would be definitely on the EM, so if you use EM missiles, shields will go down very quickly. However, this is one thing that you should keep in mind. Reactive shield hardeners or reactive armor hardeners can easily counter this implant, because they're excellent against one or two damage types. Basically, weapons that have one or two damage types will have a significant damage reduction against reactive hardeners. In that case, you should swap to the default setup until you break the tank of the target, and once the tank of the target is broken, you can easily go and use the preferred damage type. It will work really well. So this is the next wave, and well, as expected, this little boat is slapping those small ships. Now, the range is definitely something to keep in mind when you're using the small rocket launchers. They have very short range, but they really do slap hard once they hit, and they have a very satisfying rate of fire. That is just very satisfying to watch. So surprisingly, I'm actually having a lot of fun with this little boat. Actually not surprisingly, because I already used the stars before, but these little ships are actually very fun, and you should definitely give them a try. If you're looking for something new, then definitely give those little ships a try. They can be surprisingly good. They can definitely do anything else that other ships can do without a problem. It all really depends on the build, on the player skills, on the tactics, and on the approach that you take. After all, EVE is basically a game where you could make anything basically happen as long as you have a good idea for it, and this is something I learned from EVE Online a long time ago, and I applied the same idea into this game, and so far I have to say that it works. It works really well. I would say surprisingly, but at the same time it's not really surprisingly, because it's basically about the same game in the end. It's EVE after all, and the things, the tactics that work in one game should probably work in the other as well. And I like to put that to the test. Now, in EVE Online, I usually use my Talwar as a long-range ship, and I did rely on the speed tank. You can do the exact same thing over here, by the way. Absolutely no big difference, honestly. And if you were flying the Talwar in EVE Online as a kite with the light missile launchers, then you can do the same thing over here. Basically, the normal small missile launchers are light missile launchers, while the rocket launchers are basically the small torpedoes in this game. I know the weapon naming is a little bit confusing, but it is what it is. It's important to know these little details. And while I'm talking about that, a Balgorn got yeeted at our gate. Oh boy, I got some salt as well. That's some premium salt, and my internet is not in the best shape as well. Usually when I record videos over here, I also like to go and I usually have a camp up while recording this so that I don't miss any targets. It's funny because when I record and when I have the game offline, I miss, like, there's a Macariel, there's a Rattlesnake, there's a bunch of other big battleships. But when I boot up both games at the same time, both the test server and the live server, then I can basically be in both and do things in both of the games, and this is what I'm currently doing. One good thing about this phone, I can easily lock the screen recorder on one instance while the other one is in the background, so I can swap, and you won't notice the main game on top of this one. But that's more on the technical aspects. And also I have to say, look how big the Hyperion is. This thing is a monster. Take a look how small this little destroyer is and how big that thing is. That Hyperion is a monster. I always forget, I kind of did forget how big the ships actually are. Some of them are several kilometers long, and that's actually a pretty big and a pretty fat ship. Well then, this was actually a good run with the Corax to assault. Definitely a very unique destroyer. Now, I also noticed that the Corax has a phenomenal lock-on speed and definitely can surprise a lot of frigate pilots and a lot of interceptor pilots. So if you're looking for a very good destroyer that is a little bit slow, but it has some pretty good and in some cases terrifying damage application and excellent alpha damage, as well as very good lock-on speed, then the Corax to assault is definitely one of the ships that I would recommend for you. So with that being said, hope that you enjoyed this little run with the Corax to assault with the space submarine. Hope that the builds that you see here can help you at building your own ship, or at least I hope that they can inspire you to come up with your own build. After all, that's my goal. And hope that you enjoyed. I love you all. Stay safe, fly safe, and I'll see you next time.